find a glorious home in heaven after a while. Father, for those things that have come between us and you, for the sins we have committed, for the things we have left undone that you've told us to do, we ask your forgiveness that we might stand justified before you now. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay, so there, again, just as a hopefully quick review, we remember the information that we have in our books on this period that we're in, Jesus' trial, how the trial was illegal. We scanned those quickly on Wednesday night. Again, keeping in mind that we have several segments in this trial process, and we feel it needful to kind of always note, probably in our parlance, trial should be in quotes because there's nothing really just or legal or processional about this trial. But we have the encounter at the house of Annas, the former high priest that only John records. Then we have the sort of pre-trial before Caiaphas, although it is in essence the predetermined outcome trial, and then the formal trial, again, quote unquote, before the entire Jewish council. Matthew, Mark, and Luke all record elements of all of these, but really needful to look at all of them to get the whole thing. The trial before Pilate, the brief encounter or the encounter with Herod that there again only Luke records, and then the final trial before Pilate, at least some detail of which is recorded in all four gospel accounts. So we have begun a look at these things. We also sort of cautioned everyone on Wednesday to keep in mind that some of these events are happening concurrently, that the various writers record. So it's not simply directly progressive, one event to the next. We had gotten to the point on question 4, we were talking about the fact that Jesus remained silent up to a point. I probably didn't characterize that completely correctly. We noticed in the first encounter with Annas that Jesus did speak there as he goes before to Caiaphas's house and the encounter there. That is where we initially saw him silent. And again, I think there is a point, certainly the fulfillment of the prophecy in Isaiah 53:7, but there's also a point that he is silent up to when Caiaphas issues really, I guess you'd say, the charge at hand, or I suppose in more plain terms, the gripe that the Jewish leaders have with Jesus, and that is that he claims to be the Son of God. And when that has been verbalized, when Caiaphas makes that statement so that there is no question for those present, there is no question for us today reflecting upon it, that it is clearly understood that whether it's accepted or whether it's rejected, that is the charge on the table, that this individual claims that he is the Son of God. We look forward to a couple of events down the line to Luke 22:67, where the point comes up again during the formal trial, where Jesus says, "If thou art or Caiaphas says, if thou art the Christ, tell us." But he said unto them, "If I tell you, you will not believe, and if I ask, you will not answer." He sort of completes the statement there that yes, that's the charge, but you are not going to believe it. You are not going to accept it, and that's the whole reason we're where we are. And then one last reminder, we keep before us always as we go through all of this. It is not Annas, it is not Caiaphas, it is not the Sanhedrin, it is not Pilate, it is not Roman soldiers. None of them are driving these events. The Father and the Son are guiding everything that happens. All right, so through question 4, anything else anyone wishes to add? I have no recollection where we left off Wednesday night. Reggie, can you get us started? I think we left off with you Wednesday night, but we'll ask you to go again. Number 5, what implication was made to the high priest when Jesus said, "Hereafter you will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds"? And you know, we remember this. We remember during the final discourse that Jesus had when his apostles inquired about not only the events to come, but the end of time and the various statements Jesus had made about future judgment, and here and now, and I encourage anyone to give us their viewpoint, but the wording is the same as what he described about the coming judgment on Jerusalem in AD 70. But the wording is also apropos for what all men will see one day, which is the return of the Lord, what all men will do one day, which is bow before him, sitting at the right hand of his Father. So which specific aspect of that might be included in these statements at this point in time before the Jewish council, but they both harken back, as we've observed before, to Psalm 110, first couple verses, into Daniel 7. So the other thoughts on that? Bob?
Yeah, the reason why it is considered to be blasphemy is because they did not consider Jesus to be deity. However, with all the proofs that he had given and all the fulfillments of scriptures that had occurred even thus far, they should have known that he was deity, that he was the Messiah and was deity.
Right. And I guess a little of my quandary there in the wording of the question was the implication to the high priest that it was blasphemy, or was the implication that Jesus was trying to make to the high priest that you will see me coming in judgment? And both are certainly true. Other thoughts? Eric?
Yeah, they understood the term that Jesus uses to see the Son of Man coming in the cloud, making himself the Messiah. So in their mind, they realize, hey, he just claimed to be the Messiah, the coming Messiah. We believe he's not. So now that last portion of that kind of thing in their mind.
Yeah, really the statement about coming on the clouds of heaven is hand in hand with the statement that I am the Son of the Most High. They're equally blasphemous in terms of the Jewish leadership, certainly. Lindia, how about 6? What things are done to Jesus after he concedes he is the Christ? It says list at least 4 things done by the council.
I had that they accused him of blasphemy. They spat in his face, they beat him with their fists, and others slapped him.
Yeah, depending on how we parse things out in Mark 14 there, in 64 and 65, certainly as Lindia notes, the first thing is they accuse him of blasphemy, and then I guess the next thing is, part and parcel to that, they condemn him to death. So he's accused of blasphemy, which does, if rightfully accused under Jewish law, would merit a death sentence. And then, as Lindia said, Mark 14:65 and other verses, some began to spit on him. They covered his face or blindfolded him. They buffeted him. If we put the various accounts together, they both slapped and punched him. If we assemble all the information. And then they said to him, prophesy. What an astounding and condemning thing to say to the Son of God, prophesy. Well, if he is the Son of God, he's not going to prophesy on demand, of course, anyway. But all of these things are hurled at him and laid before him. Any other comments on it, Bob?
And as you mentioned before, and throughout this, Jesus had great self-control because, quite honestly, had he, and these are temptations, because he could have, he could have struck the person dead. He could have said who it was. He could have done all these things, but that didn't have anything to do with his mission. Therefore, he endured that, all these indignities and all the indignities upon the cross also.
No, and really from here even on through, what happens in the Praetorium with Pilate, all of these things endured by God in the flesh, which, as we talked about Wednesday, he didn't have to in terms of who he was and what he could do, but he did have to in terms of fulfilling the Father's requirement of what he must endure to pay the price for our sin, and all the more poignant in that regard. Very good. Let's stop for just a moment and read a few verses. I want to go to Luke 22, verse 54, and just read a few verses there, because I think Luke gives the best picture of this kind of sequence of events that's going on here and into the next questions. So let's just make sure we're all on the same page. Luke 22, 54. And they seized him and led him away and brought him unto the high priest's house. This is from the point of the arrest, obviously. And when they had kindled a fire in the midst of the court, I said the arrest, from the point of going from the arrest to Caiaphas' house. So this is kind of, again, skipping over what John tells us about Annas, the encounter at Annas' house. So there again, factor that in. They seized him and led him away, brought him into the high priest's house, but Peter followed afar off. When they had kindled a fire in the midst of the court and had sat down together, Peter sat in the midst of them. And a certain maid, seeing him as he sat in the light of the fire, looking steadfastly upon him, said, This man also was with him. But he denied, saying, Woman, I know him not. And after a little while, another saw him and said, Thou also art one of them. But Peter said, Man, I am not. And after the space of about 1 hour, another confidently affirmed, saying, Of a truth, this man also was with him, for he is a Galilean. But Peter said, Man, I know not what thou sayest. And immediately while he spake, yet spake the cock crew. And the Lord turned and looked upon Peter. Peter remembered the word of the Lord, how that he said unto him, Before the cock crow this day, thou shalt deny me thrice. And he went out and wept bitterly. I know that gets into the questions that we have coming up, but that's kind of the most complete look at Peter's involvement here, because all three questionings are included. And I just kind of wanted that to be in mind as we go forward. There's some other details we'll add as we proceed. Christopher, do you have number 7? Why were some in the courtyard convinced that Peter was one of the disciples? His speech betrayed him. Yeah. And that was indicated here in a way. Mark 14:70 says it very specifically. Look over at John 18 too. and whether this is, well, I think it is material. John 18 gives us a little bit of extra detail in verse 25. Now Simon Peter was standing and warming himself. They said therefore unto him, Art thou also one of his disciples? He denied and said, I am not. One of the servants of the high priest, being a kinsman of him whose ear Peter cut off, saith, Did not I see thee in the garden with him? Peter therefore denied again, and straightway the cock crew. So we see also an aspect there of something else where someone recognizes him as to where he was and who he was with, and indeed a fairly significant detail of something he did that at that moment in time he was probably pretty enthusiastic to deny, because, I actually was the one that cut off your relative's ear. That's not something he's going to want to be associated with at all in that environment. So I think that, someone recognizes him from that aspect as well. Certainly cause from a worldly standpoint for Peter to be distancing himself from this. Bob?
One thing that we need to recognize here in the harmony that they've done, Thomas and Gundry, they align John 18:25 to the first denial of Peter. It's probably not, because back in John 18, 15 through 18, that was probably what coincides with the first denial that Peter made. And what you read is the second and third, and should align thusly. So we need to look at that, and I can understand why they didn't, because they sandwiched that first denial John did between the arrest and Annas' trial. And again, these things are happening simultaneously. The Peter's denials and the trials, various trials, are happening simultaneously. So, and then we get into Judas, and those things are happening simultaneously with the other things happening. So we need to keep that in mind.
Right, and there again, and pull that back out, but yes, it is a little challenging, and I apologize because I didn't look at Thomas and Gundry, but it is so important to look at all four accounts to get all of the detail as much as anything, and the details are important, the procession of events is important, but all that the Lord went through is what we really just have to realize. He is struck at the very first encounter at Annas' house. He is struck again multiple times at Caiaphas' dwelling. He endures, and Bob enumerated this so well last Sunday. If you were not here, you might be able to hear it on the class recording if you wish to. But he's already tremendously exhausted and fatigued from the week's events and from no rest leading up to this, and now he is being systematically inflicted physical harm each step along the way. And again, keep note of this. We just read that this one encounter, it was an hour later, that there are hours passing here. This is not boom, 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 boom. There are hours passing here that the Lord is injured stands waiting. He's not allowed to go rest somewhere. He's injured again. He's moved from place to place. He's injured again. And the injury and the beatings, of course, become more severe once he gets to Herod's palace than when he gets finally passed judgment on it at the Praetorium the final time by Pilate. And then after that, there's, again, as Bob said last Sunday, by the time he is trudging down the road to Golgotha, it is only probably because he is the Son of God, determined to fulfill his mission, that he is even alive. So don't, please, and I don't think you would, lose sight on that.
So is John the only one where we have like a separation of the denials of other scripture? That's the only one thing?
Well, there again, I think Luke enumerates 3 different denials, but they're very compressed.
That's what I'm saying, the compression.
Yeah.
The reading part.
And John is the only one that talks about Annas, and he's the only one that gives us that detail that one of his accusers, is actually a relative of the high priest's servant. I don't think any of the others note that. So, yeah, there again, there's incremental detail in all of this. Don?
I'm always interested about this kindling of the fire. In 55 it says, and when they kindled a fire in the middle of the courtyard and sat down together, Peter sat down among them. So you don't kindle a fire when it's hot outside. You kindle it when it's cold. And this might have been brought up last time I wasn't here, but Jesus had prayed so hard that his sweat was great drops of blood. And I think the sweating of the blood, the sweat was so profuse off of Jesus when he was praying when it's cold. And you don't usually sweat when you're cold. You sweat when you're hot. And it was so cold, they kindled the fire, but Jesus is praying so hard, he's sweating as drops. And I think that needs to be brought out so we can appreciate what he was going through in prayer. Such a fervent prayer in the cold day, he is sweating profusely. And you don't do that when it's cold.
And that's actually obviously a terrific point. And we did make the point that it was a stress response that has been medically documented, I suppose, that caused this. But in the light of it, which we didn't apply to it being a cold night, it's even more emphatic. So that's a very good thing to kind of track back to. But we did discuss that a little bit. And noted the fact that this was tremendous duress he was under.
And the fact that it would be cold at night is because it's right after, it's not too long after the vernal equinox, because that's when they start the month of Abib, basically, at the first new moon after the vernal equinox. And so it's springtime, and Judea is a semi-arid climate. And if you've ever lived in a semi-arid climate or a desert environment, there's no humidity or very little humidity, therefore all the heat dissipates from the day. So even when it's not that cold during the day, at night, without the sun's warmth, it's going to get cold fast.
Absolutely. So yes, it is cold. There is a fire kindled. And just, I guess one other thing to mention, I always want to say something like, I hate to slow us down even more, but I've been doing it for 9 months. So. But Chris mentioned something, albeit a little bit facetiously to me, but it does bear mentioning. We observed that John is the one that kind of got Peter into the environs of the high priest's house. And the question is well asked, did Peter necessarily want to be? He was following at a distance. Peter had the girl at the door John had the girl at the door let Peter in, Was Peter content out there, just following at a distance, or did he necessarily want to be in? Clearly, he is under a lot of duress and other emotions once he is in. So, just to mention that, since that's part of the procession of events. But Clarence, number 8, how many times did the rooster crow before Peter denied Jesus? 3 times? Yeah, Mark 14's account says twice. There's the initial crowing, and then there's the crowing right before dawn, which is the third one. And Linda Matthews, was it just the rooster crow that prompted Peter to remember the words of the Lord? What else happened that led him to weep bitterly? He wept bitterly, and what there in Luke 22:61 is divulged to us that I don't think the others tell us. Yeah, as if the crowing of the rooster the second time, as Jesus had affirmed to him would occur upon his last denial, wasn't enough. The Lord, and again, stop and consider what the Lord had been through physically since his arrest already, and that Peter was privy to. And now he turns and looks at Peter. Yeah, and Peter goes out and weeps bitterly, understandably. Okay, other thoughts on anything there in lesson 70, Phil?
They said a million times probably with these 4 gospels, but I love the way that they can still be in harmony but say different things about the twice and the once and Jesus looking and the others don't mention it, but it all stays in harmony with what it says.
Yeah, and there's, and this is an accusation made, we've alluded to it before, but, there's inconsistency here. Well, we haven't, I don't believe, encountered a time where when we stop and look and understand, we can't explain exactly what is said, why it's said, and how it meshes together. I don't think we've ever just rationalized something away. I think we've looked at it and said, this actually makes sense if we stop and look at it. And I think in association to that, we have said, hopefully, just about every time, this is why the Lord wants us to look into it more than just read through it and go, okay, fine. Very good. Linda.
Yeah, I think people within themselves feel that he had failed Christ because Christ had told him that he would deny him, and he denied it. He denied it. He would deny him. So I think it's more like Peter felt like he had failed Christ.
Yes, and Bob made the apt observation Wednesday night that I really hadn't completely connected, that at the outset of this, Peter was ready to go. He pulls his sword, and then Jesus says no. And so Peter's like, okay, I was ready to fight and you said no, and now they're taking you off and now they're beating you and you're allowing it. And even though the Lord had told his apostles, this is exactly what's going to happen, it's still really hard to take.
You just see so many times when the Lord escaped all these plans that happened to him, and this is what was meant to happen. So many times that when they went to Caesar, he got past the crowd. He was all in face, and all of a sudden, this one time, and Peter's probably thinking that same thing, like, why is he just allowing all this? And now, when he's seeing it, and then somebody's confronting him about it, and he saw what happened before when he tried to fight, and he was like, well, he told him not to. I can see the conflict within him, and so is it was the plan that was supposed to happen. It was what it was meant to be. He was going to deny it because the Lord had known this already.
And really something Reggie said there just hit me like a ton of bricks that I really, you need to make the connections. Have you ever had a situation where someone or maybe you read a description of a horrific event, and it really was like, well, that's terrible. But then you saw a depiction of that event, and it's like, okay, wait a minute. It's one thing to be told, here is what's going to happen. It's another level to actually see it unfold before you. And that's a terrific point.
Justin really fails to mention the council meeting at daybreak to basically rubber stamp what had already been determined before Caiaphas. But that does occur before he's led off to Pilate. So we need to keep that in mind also.
Yeah, the verses in Luke 22, 67 and following that I read earlier are actually from that. It is somewhat repetitive of the pre-trial at Caiaphas' house, because that trial was in effect there to sort of get down, get the conviction and have everything laid out. So now we can have the formal Sanhedrin trial and quickly accomplish the formal conviction and send him off to Pilate. But there again, this is more time that the Lord is here, that the Lord is enduring physical suffering, that his physical resources are being challenged. It's the third step. Annas, the pretrial at Caiaphas, the trial after sunrise, the legal trial before the Sanhedrin, where again the conviction of proclaiming himself the Son of God is made.
And that's and that's also important. Actually, Luke 22:66 is really where it starts, and that may explain how Jesus looked at Peter, because he was led away to the council, and that was held in a different place. So he was probably being led out of Caiaphas' household when he looked at Peter after his third denial. The other thing is, since it's daybreak, it's approximately 6 o'clock. It's right after the cock crew. So it's about 6 o'clock. And now we've got the council, Pilate, Herod, Pilate again, and the trip to Golgotha, all happening between 6 and 9.
Yeah, all of that still to come, as we discussed either Wednesday or Sunday or both. That this whole process from the arrest forward, 11 p.m., midnight, starting, and then all of this, accumulate the hours in our minds, and all of the things that are happening. Just conceiving of the check marks along the way of what we're done to the Lord is plenty, but accumulate the time as well. Phil?
Sorry, I'm thinking the weeds here, but I was assuming reading that Jesus looked at Peter that logistically and physically, would he have been able to normally, as a human ear, could hear him? Was it too far away? I just thought about that again. But
I don't think Jesus needed to hear him. I mean, if Jesus heard the rooster crow, Jesus would have known regardless, or knew regardless. If Jesus heard the rooster crow, and keep in mind, I don't know if John was in earshot of Peter or not. John had, heard what Jesus said to Peter previously. So, any of the apostles that heard the rooster crow, that had to, even if they weren't there, they knew what Jesus had said. It's just hard to get our minds around. Good. Anyone else?
Peter denied because he was afraid. He was afraid of getting hurt like Jesus was going to get ready to get hurt. And I always think, why would we deny him today? I mean, sometimes I never get why we deny him today. It may not be the cool thing to do, but I think, man, if Jesus was looking on us like he looked on Peter, we would feel so bad. But here, sometimes we deny him, and we're not ever afraid. We have nothing to be afraid of. But I don't get why we still deny him. I don't get it.
I mean, it's a tremendous statement to consider, Don. It's, you know, what is, I mean, there are places on the planet where, you know, confessing him is and can be fatal, even now today. But for us, that's not the case. All we might get is hurled some insults. And yet, and I think here's the value of, probably everybody here has studied this before, here's the value of reminding ourselves what he went through. And so now when the opportunity to deny him comes, maybe we keep this fresh in mind and go, you know, I don't know what, you know, if somebody's going to say to me or whatever, but I can stand up for him in the face of what he did. It's a good point. It's very good. All right, lesson 71. Was that first bell? Second bell? First? Okay. All right, lesson 71. Bob has noted that we've now gone in the lesson book from the pretrial before Annas, the former high priest, to the pretrial before Caiaphas, the acting high priest, to the trial before the Jewish council. The Lord has been found worthy of death because of his blasphemy, supposed, and now going to Pilate at the who resided at the Praetorium. Well, we just answered that. Pilate. Why did the Jew? And actually, we've discussed question 1 already. Why did the Jewish council not enter this place? John 18:28 tells us that they didn't want to enter. This is a Gentiles' dwelling. They didn't want to enter and become unclean, and thus not be able to partake of the Passover. They should have partaken of the Passover the night before instead of all of this instigation against the Lord, but they didn't. So they still need to take of the Passover. They don't want to become unclean and consequently have to go through a cleansing process and take of the Passover later. Were there any other comments on that, Bob?
And we also need to keep in mind that the Jews used Passover expansively. It was, at that time, it was not just the Passover per se, but at times they included the Passover and the 7 days of unleavened bread since they were all a unit. And on the first day of unleavened bread, there was a holy convocation, and there was a meal that was to be eaten then also. So this may have reference to that. It may have reference to the late eating of the Passover meal itself. We can't be exactly certain about that, but when we read Passover, we think only of what should have been eaten on the 14th day.
Right. Although the gospel accounts generally seem to take it in the context of the meal itself, or at least that's my reading of it. But yes, as we discussed back when we first brought this up, you know, there's some explanation as to why this is, but this is at least for sure their stance on why they don't wish to go in there. Grace. Do you have number 2? When the Jews told Pilate it was not lawful for them to put Jesus to death, how did this signify what death Jesus would die? Uh-huh. Exactly. Very good. If, under Jewish law, as a blasphemer, what was the death penalty Jesus would endure? Stoning. I mean, that's the Jewish law. So the Jewish law doesn't say anything about crucifixion at all. That was a Roman punishment. The prophecies, as we discussed a couple of weeks ago, suggest that Jesus will die by crucifixion. So there's an issue there. The Jews can't put him to death by crucifixion. They don't have that in their law book. They have stoning, which they're not even, since about 6 or 7 AD, allowed by the Roman government to employ on their own. We know that they do sometimes, kind of in a mob format. We think about Stephen, for one. But they don't, on a procedural basis, have the ability to stone someone, which is the penalty under the law of Moses for blasphemy. But prophecy tells us crucifixion, hung on a tree, lifted up, is how the Lord would die, and here that falls into place by him being brought to the Romans for capital punishment. All right, Lord willing, Bob will continue a week from today. We will not have this class on Wednesday night. We have VBS this week and a special series of classes. So a week from today, Lord willing, this class will continue.